just thinking a little bit about life and consciousness, and to a certain extent about matter, drawing on a video I made yesterday, day before yesterday, where I was basically saying these things are really problematic concepts, or at least life and consciousness are problematic concepts, mainly because they're ill-defined and not possible to easily define. And the reason for that being that they're, well, partly to do with the way they are as categories, but also the effects of that, which is that we seem to want to associate those terms, particularly life and consciousness, but as Matt said, possibly other words like matter, with a single kind of principle, a principle that underpins life in the most abstract sense, or that underpins consciousness in the most abstract sense, or possibly matter in the most abstract sense. But it's this one unique identifier, And what I was saying there was that's not basically how those things work anyway. Life, I suspect consciousness, and probably matter, is really a collection of all different kinds of processes and properties. And it's not until you get to identifiably well-defined, clear property that you're talking about, ideally one that's possibly expressed in the form of mathematics or something like it, although I'm not married to that idea. It's not until you get to that level of detail that you can really say anything of any detail, which is why the reductive sciences are so successful. You take concepts like life, you turn it into a science like biology, you break that down into sub-disciplines, like cell biology, like, see, I know nothing about this stuff, like neurology, like, all the rest of the fields of biology. And get smaller and smaller fields until you've got a whole set of really completely tractable problems which can be expressed in terms of experimental methods and in terms of empirical results, those kinds of things. And then you've got some purchase on the problems, haven't you? And I think the same thing is true, as I say, of life and consciousness. Now, I've been thinking of analogies for this, because it's still really tempting to keep going, yes, but you still haven't explained life. What you've done is explained biology there. You've explained how cells work, you've explained how the brain works, and you've explained how skin functions and bones work. But you still haven't said what life is. You still haven't explained the life thing. Or you still haven't explained the consciousness thing. You've explained perception, and you've explained memory, and you've explained, I assume we can do this. You've explained perception, you've explained memory, you've solved all the small problems, but you still haven't explained the hard problem of consciousness. What is consciousness? You know what I mean? That's the kind of response, potentially. So I'm thinking of analogies. This isn't perfect, but it's the one I've got so far. I could say about my car that I'm driving, this old Audi 80 I drive around in. My car, here it is, it's going down the road, down the M6 here, M5, sorry. I could say it's got this thing called motricity. I'm borrowing Rudolf Linas's term here. It's got this thing, this motricity about it. See, look, here it's going, look, and it's moving through space. It's fantastic. How can we possibly explain this motricity? And of course you'd think I was mad, and you'd talk to me about internal combustion engines and how they work, and how gears and differentials and drive shafts work, and you'd probably talk to me about bearings and spark plugs, or heat plugs in this case because it's a diesel. You might talk to me about the chemistry of combustion and Boyle's law, whatever the physical law talks about the expansion of gases. You might talk to me about clutches and lubrication and surface chemistry, those kind of things. And you could explain the whole damn thing, and I could still possibly come back to you and say, yeah, but you haven't really explained the motricity, have you? All you've done is explain the little bits of the car. You haven't explained this key function, which is the motricity, and which it must, in some way, must exist like almost like a spiritual potential that permeates this vehicle overall, or which perhaps resides in a special part at the equivalent of the pineal gland in the engine. It must reside in this particular place, and that's the seat of motricity, the real mechanical correlate of motricity. I could search the whole car and look for the mechanical correlates of motricity. But you'd think I was nuts, wouldn't you? You would think I was nuts. So I think that's kind of what happens when we're talking about, you know, what is consciousness or what is life. We're looking for the neural correlates of consciousness, which, you know, admittedly may be possible, but, you know, we're looking for something where there is, when outside of mechanical explanation, I mean mechanical in the broadest sense, or outside of physical and material explanation, we're looking for something that exceeds the properties of things we're talking about. I think the same is even true of matter. I guess I'm just supporting what you were saying there, Matt. You know, matter exists as a series of properties, which might be things like mass or extension or, you know, whatever instrument you point at the piece of matter to find out what it's doing. It exists as a series of properties and appearances and readings on instruments and so on. But it's very tempting to think, yeah, but what is matter really? What is this being thing, you know? What is the being of matter? What is the motricity of my Audi 80?